I decided one day that I'd audition for the New Zealand Army Band. I got in. I'm a terrible saver and I love spending money. So I just stuck my head above my desk for a bit and said, hey, I'd like to look at some other opportunities here. But Sharesies accounts they had since that. And I did that same math. So I've got a way more bullish approach on that. People almost always make good decisions and people make bad decisions and probably make bad decisions where they had access to it on our platform or somewhere else, right? I think there's better ledgers than blockchain, firstly, but sometimes that doesn't matter. What matters is where there's people and where there's money. I mean, the NFTs space definitely had its boom, right? I'll start by saying I'm an optimist in humans and an optimist in democracy as well.
This is Mark Publikowski, and welcome to the TechMates podcast, where my partner Henrik and I explore how Kiwi and Aussie founders are reshaping the future and what sets them apart. Henrik and I have been part of successful companies in Silicon Valley and Europe, and now bring that expertise to partner with entrepreneurs in Australasia. By sharing the personal stories of successful Kiwi and Aussie founders and how they got here, we hope to inspire you to dream big. This is TechMates, bringing an outsider's perspective to the stories of those daring to disrupt down under. Let's dive in.
Leighton, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Kia ora.
All right. Awesome. So you're co-CEO of Sharesies. You also founded a beer company, I believe. But yeah, maybe we start with kind of where you grew up, what your childhood was like. I think, yeah, you have some musician background as well, so super interested in that. Would love to learn more about kind of your early days.
Yeah, cool. So early day, I grew up in Hawera in Taranaki, so very small town.
Wow.
In South Taranaki. I mean, really great place to grow up. All of my family were there. I'm from quite a large family. So my dad had 3 brothers and my mum has 5 brothers and a sister. So I've got lots of first cousins, 30 something first cousins. And then of course you have second stuff. And I've got 3 brothers myself, of which I'm the oldest. So yeah, very much a small town boy, but more or less knew my whole life that, well, since I first experienced the city, that I would probably end up in a city somewhere with more people and the excitement of a city I just always loved.
Was that New Plymouth? The city that you first experienced?
Most of the city, yeah. So I'd go there and always blow my mind, driving to the big lights, which is always funny because you go, now Wellington seems like such a small city where I live now, which is compared to New Plymouth, multiples of it. And then I spend a lot of time in Sydney now, which of course is a big city. And then last year, for the first time since COVID, I went back to New York and it's like, it's just this escalating world, isn't it? But yeah.
That's cool. And what were you interested in as a kid? I think you were interested in flying. Did I read that somewhere? You want to be a pilot?
Yeah, you've done some good reading there. I did want to be a pilot. Yes, actually, I was going to combine being a pilot with business. Actually, I always thought I'd own Sunshine Air was the company because my dad used to do a lot of work travel and he'd always fly out of New Plymouth on the planes. And of course, thought we're massive. Again, you fly on a plane to New Plymouth now and you're like, I don't really want to fly on that. I thought I'd be a pilot and I'd be the first plane that flew into Hawera so that people could fly straight out of there and we didn't have to drive away New Plymouth to drop that off. But that never really eventuated anyway.
Did you ever charter a flight to Hawera? No.
And I don't like the idea of small planes, to be honest now. It's comical because I'm fine with flying. I do a lot of flying, but there's something in the last few years, maybe since I had kids or something, that I don't particularly love the idea of single engine planes or of helicopters and things like that.
Cool. Yeah. So then what did you, you had a stint as a musician, as in the army? How did that sort of come about? Yeah. How did that kind of?
So I played music. The great things about those small towns, and I'm still very grateful for it, is every day you do something. I'm not sure if it's mum and dad just getting free babysitting or what it was, but 2 nights of the week I'd be doing music. The rest of the nights basically and the weekends we'd be doing sport and played a huge amount of sport growing up in heaps of clubs and stuff. And my parents were actively involved in quite a few of the committees and stuff for that stuff as well. They also played sport and my dad played music as well. So those small towns have such a community around all that stuff, which I think is a little bit harder to come by in the busyness of the city sometimes. Yeah, music, I started playing when I was 7 or 8 and loved it when I first started and was pretty good as a kid. Obviously it's some sort of natural.
And you just kind of wanted to do that on your own, or was there some influence in the family? Somebody who was a musician?
No, because dad played and I wanted to play. I actually wanted to play the trombone because dad played the trombone, but I was so little that would have looked ridiculous. So I started on the trumpet, and that's what I went on to play cornet and trumpet.
What did your dad do for a job? Sounds like he was traveling a lot, but also a musician, kind of amateur.
Yeah, so he is in engineering, so he's a tradesperson, a fitter and turner by trade, and then went on to more general management in those roles and ultimately sales. So what best summary is he sells these gigantic cheese machines and dairy stuff all over the world.
Wow. That's cool. Nice. So you got into music and you just started playing yourself, or you started taking lessons, or played at school, or
So I had lessons, uh, and the local band was very um, active, I suppose. When I first started playing, it's sort of had its ups and downs since then, so it can really depend on who the person in the middle is, or the teacher, and the person bring it together. I did that. In fact, a huge number of my friends. It's how Martin and I, one of our co-founders at Sharesies, actually met, was in brass bands. But yeah,
in
it
brass
just
band
went.
in Taranaki?
I know later, and once I'd moved to Wellington as part of the Wellington Brass, and like most people at high school age, probably I went off it for a couple of years. Maybe it just wasn't the cool thing to do or something like that. Not that I've ever really cared too much about that. 13 or 14, and then as I got a little bit older again, I started to make a lot more friends in music, and became quite passionate again. And then it was never any plan to go be a musician. It just happened, which has happened to me in a few things in my life, I'd say. But I
Interesting.
ended up in the New Zealand Army Band playing the trumpet, and I was there for about 6 years.
Wow. So did you go straight from kind of high school to the army, or did you go to college first?
No, straight. So I was always thought I thought I'd go to Palmerston North, which is where all my friends went, the Big Smoke, for university, but I didn't. I decided one day that I'd audition for the New Zealand Army Band. I got in, and I left like the day after my last exam or something. It was that quick.
Wow. And what was that like? I mean, I've never met anybody who was in the New Zealand Army, much less the New Zealand Army Band. What was that whole experience like? Did you have like basic training?
Yeah, I did have to do just as like a territorial basic trainings. It was 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something like that. And I was quite intimidated by the idea of that, but it was absolutely, I think at that age, I think I'd find it much harder now. But as a 17-year-old guy, like, you get to go off, learn a whole bunch about weapons. I came from Taranaki anyway, and like sort of farming community. So we sort of spent a lot of time playing around in the outdoors in the bush, a little bit of hunting and stuff. And some of my friends were really into that. So got to do that, and then pretend to be in, because at that point you are still pretending, and then people are yelling at you and stuff the whole time. But my reflection is, after the first couple of days, it just becomes like they're talking to you. It's just a new language. So they're absolutely in your face going for it. It's all you hear is, "Oh, can you please go over there and tidy your boots up?" Or something. And it just becomes life for a little bit. So, but most of my time in the army wasn't like that. And most people's time in the army isn't like that. Like, you do the basic training, which is sort of get you ready. I don't think it's as bad as what it looks like on TV or anything like that, although it is scary going in there. Particularly, someone showed me Full Metal Jacket like the night before we went, and I was like, I'm not sure if you've seen that movie, but it certainly got me shaking in my boots before yeah. And then once you're in the army, again, that's changed a bit more. Remembering this is like terrifyingly, actually 20 years ago now. I had math for a long time. But even then, the army was quite a different place. And any job that you could get in civilian life, you could basically get in the army. So you could be a musician, you could be a doctor, you could be a nurse, you could be a medic, you could be administrator, you could be like a chef, you could be a cook. Like, there's most of the jobs you can do outside of the army. And like I say, that has changed a bit now, although it'll definitely be true in the big militaries offshore, but you can do that in the army as well.
Interesting. And what prompted you to go into the army? Was that something you kind of just came up, or you just wanted to do it?
That's an opportunity to play music full time.
Right. And how was that? Did you get to play a lot? What in what instances is the New Zealand band?
I did every single day for more or less 6 years. So I did a couple of army courses. So one was the basic training, and then when I got promoted to corporal, you do a course, I think section commander's course or something like that, junior NCOs, and you go off for 3 months to do a course. So I did those two courses, but apart from that, it was pretty much a music job.
And you studied then at the same time, right? You started to study while you were in the army?
Yeah. So while I was in the army, I had this opportunity come up to go down the path of being the director of music of the army band, which is basically like the leader of the band of that unit of the 45 or so people that were there. And as part of that, I had to do a few additional tests. I was quite young, and I don't think it landed particularly well with some people in the band at the time, because it was normally a more traditional normally you just work your way through the ranks, and then 10 or 15 years in, you'd sort of end up with those opportunities. So either way, obviously I didn't ultimately choose that track, but I was going down it for a little bit. I did my officer selection course, and then as part of that, I got to get my degree funded through the military. So I applied for that, and I did business and finance I did probably about 2.5 years of my degree or something whilst I was in the army,
Oh,
extramural on top of my job.
was that in Wellington?
No, it was extramural. So I'd fly if I had to do courses somewhere or exams. They were normally in Christchurch where I was based, or I would fly to Palmerston North or Wellington campus to do specific courses. But I had still had 6 months of my degree left once I finished in the army, and once I went to do that, I realized. I moved to Wellington for Massey. But just prior to that, the army had paid for me to go and do a semester. I don't know how long a semester is, say half a year or a few months, full time. And it was wild. So that was my first time since I was 17 out of the army, which I'm sure you've heard the term institutionalized, but an army, like any place you can be institutionalized in. And I guess I realized that I definitely was in the army in that role in the band. And that was sort of like it was just one of those world opens up for you a little bit. And as part of that experience, I decided that probably I didn't want to go into this job and commit myself to, doing a decade of this. I felt like maybe there's other things that I'd like to try first.
What were the folks in the army like? Like, I'm sure it's people from all over New Zealand, right? Did you get to meet people from all over the country? And kind of what is the did you feel like a deep patriotism while you were there?
Look, I was so young. Like, I was very proud of doing what we were doing, and the band had an amazing reputation internationally, and we spent a huge amount of time offshore doing sort of like military relations or government relations type work, like and brand ambassadorship and stuff all over the world. And some of these massive defense exhibitions where we would get other people come with us from the military who wanted to go to the defense exhibition, but the band was invited there first as the entertainment. So there's these random roles that had to play. I spent 3 different trips for a couple of months in Edinburgh at the military tattoo there, for example, which is viewed by thousands and thousands. Yet, like, we do 30 odd shows on the esplanade of Edinburgh Castle. So yeah, I was hugely proud of being in there, and we spent a huge amount of time. Like, I've got some amazing friends to this day, actually, from other bands around the world that we would meet. Like, the guards bands that do in London every day, basically, they march the bands through big hats. Like, I was lucky enough to do a transfer with them, so I spent a bunch of time where one of their players came to New Zealand, and I went over there. So it was called this thing called Long Look. So you get all these quite incredible opportunities. Like really grateful for it. Yeah.
That's so cool. And what about the people? Like, did you meet people from all over New Zealand? Did you kind of get a sense of like the size of the country, the diversity of it, or was there anything interesting there?
We would travel to the randomest places. Like, we were always touring, right? We'd just go around doing all sorts of random things. People would little communities would invite us to different festivals or different so I haven't thought about this for a long time, but we would go to like most towns in New Zealand I think I've been to. In fact, one of my mates who I was in the band with can tell you still where the best sandwich shops are in every town because he just loves sandwich. And same with local pubs and local. So we're really, really cool way to experience the country and the world through doing this. And met a huge amount of people. And then in the army, of course, as well, like, again, got to meet lots and lots of people, and some really great people, and some of my friends are still in the band.
And when you studied business and finance, did you have a view of what your life was going to be like post army?
I've always, as my dad would say, been fascinated or interested in business and interested in money. So, like, the best way, and it's not something I observed myself till much later, but I've since done a bunch of reading about this, and maybe I think one thing I have for a long time, or since a very young age, have an appreciation of is compounding interest. Like, the first time I saw that, I really understood it as a superpower. And for context, the idea of compounding or even statistics and stuff is not an ingrained or natural human trait. And there's good reason for that. Actually, I was watching this documentary that was saying that statistics was such a late science because you didn't need to know, back in the very early days that there was a 1% chance of the tiger being in the bush. You just had to know not to go into the bush, right? So, like, these concepts aren't overly natural, but yeah, I sort of grasped that side with regards to money very early on, and had a lot of ambition for building companies and doing and being up for just getting stuff, trying stuff. I've always been up for trying stuff. I didn't know what I was going to end up in once I was in the once I started studying. I was pretty open to that. I guess I had an idea it would be money because I thought I had strength there. I was reasonably good at maths, and had a confidence that I could learn things and try things.
Right.
And you, I think I read somewhere that you started an investment club when you were still a teenager with some of your family members, right?
Yeah.
How did that sort of come about? Like, where did this whole interest in investing? I mean, as you point out, like the statistics is not a very natural kind of idea for most folks. And I think investing also isn't, right. It's not the thing you grow up with. Most people are just like, you get a job, you get paid. But investing, it's like you own something and it grows in value. And like, that's not the first way most people learn about wealth and money. So where did that kind of idea come from to you?
Yeah. So I learned the total value of money formula somewhere. And it's basically, if anyone is not aware of it, it's maybe the only important formula in finance, but it's basically, in my opinion, which is basically to say that present value of something, or a dollar today is worth a lot more than a dollar tomorrow.
Mm.
Within that, working out that formula, I did my own maths on what it would take just to never worry about retirement again. And I don't make me do that, but at the time it was, if I put $50 a week away, then I would never have to stress about, it wouldn't matter if I didn't do KiwiSaver, based on a certain return. So it's just like an exercise I did, but it really captured me. And because I also, I'm terrible saver, and like I love spending money. That's what I like. I'm a real liver of life, and then I really like. I think I'm a naturally generous person. Some people think I'm overly generous with partners at times, but like I really love. I just knew that I needed to have enough, and I needed some discipline, because if it was just in my bank account, I'd spend it like I had with all of any other money up to that date, and that remained true. Like that remains true to this day. Like if it's in, like I have to be quite tough on my money management. Obviously, I earn much more money than what I used to, but if it was up to me, it would just walk out that door, and I wouldn't even know how. So I have to put some like process around that, and I also have quite a high appetite for risk too. Like I calculated risk. Like I've always had a high appetite for that. Anyway, I did that math of $50 a week, and I was like, all right, cool. Well, how long is it going to take me to get to a house at $50 a week? I can't remember what it was, but I was like, I'm going to be 50. Like I'm not going to be I can never afford a house. So I was already having that 20 years ago. So you can just imagine what people are thinking about now.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a place where you could invest $50 anywhere or anything. The fee was $50 maybe. So that was why I was like, oh, maybe I could bring a group of people together on this. And my mum and her brothers did own some property together, and I'm not actually sure exactly how all that came about, but that was like sort of like the investment club idea that I had. It's like, well, maybe we should do that. So we got some friends and family together. So we started one when I was 17, and then we started another one about 3 or 4 years later, basically when I could afford another $50 a week, because no one I ever spoke to was like, they'd always be like, how do I get into this club? Because we were buying things. We bought the first thing we bought was a house, because that's what everyone invests in New Zealand. But since then, we've just bought all these random investments around the place. And yeah, there was just like more and more people wanted to be involved. So I'm now in like 4 different clubs, which is cool.
Wow. Leighton, we got to join one of these clubs with you.
Sharesies, this is what we're doing, right? Everyone can be in a club.
That's cool. So wait, so how did you buy a house with $50 a week?
With enough people. Yeah, it just added up like over time. Like the classic thing is this idea when we started Sharesies, not wanting to get too far ahead, but was that being an investor was aspirational, but not something that I could be, right? That's what the largest voice that came back to us. But everyone wanted to be one. It was like this. There's hardly anyone you'd speak to. No, I don't want to be an investor. For me though, if you'd asked me like when I was 17 and I'd put that first $50 away into that investment club, if I was an investor, I would have said, yes, I am. I would have filled out the survey with a tick the box quite confidently. Yeah. And then the next question would have come and say, well, what have you invested in? Be like, oh, well, I haven't actually done that yet. No, it's just in a bank account with $50. But it's still this is what is investing actually, right? It's putting something together away today in the hope that it'll grow into the future, with a plan that will grow into the future. So I had done that, and I had identified as an investor. So yeah, it just shows you can do that with any amount of money.
Yeah. Maybe let's talk about kind of, also like financial advice for young people later in the context of Sharesies, but just curious kind of after university. So you went into KiwiBank, right? How did that come about, and what was that experience like?
So I spent a very short time before that actually as a KiwiSaver advisor, before advice was regulated. Although I will say the company I worked for did a pretty good job of education and stuff. I'd also finished a finance degree at that point. And to this day, I was passionate then that everyone should get into KiwiSaver, and this was 2007, so it was the year that it came out. And I really believed that it was a great idea for people and that people should. So it wasn't a hard product for me to sell, but it was my first since school businesses, young enterprise type thing, actually out there selling stuff, I suppose.
Maybe you should have also been selling Bitcoin.
Yes, I've got a few unfortunate stories about Bitcoin and Ethereum later. But yeah, that was the first job I had in the sales idea. I quite like. I hate missing out on something. I don't think New Zealanders are very good at sales. Well, we're not. That's just a known thing. And I think people miss out on a lot of really cool things because we don't have that. It's not like a confident thing. People would rather not tell you than tell you, even though you probably want it. And I think about that with KiwiSaver. Some people are like, didn't you feel like you're pushing something on people? I'm like, no. I'm like, jeepers, if I could push them and that was what I was allowed to do, I would, because they're silly not doing this. That's how strongly I feel.
So that was your first connection. Yeah. But now I'm really curious about Bitcoin and Ethereum. So we need to get into that. So what are the unfortunate stories?
Well, we met firstly on those coins and stuff. Sort of, again, I was fascinated by it, this new idea of currency and stuff like that, and digital. I didn't know how much I believed it, but I was interested in exploring more. And to be honest, I still don't understand how it's got as big as it is. I'm now of the view that it's a part of the financial ecosystem, but I guess the actual utility of that still puzzles me. Like I can argue pretty confidently either way. But the founder of Ethereum came to speak to us at KiwiBank, and at the time Ethereum was like maybe 2 cents a coin or something like that, right?
Vitalik or somebody else?
Yes, Vitalik. Yeah. So he was in New Zealand doing the tour around all the different banks, and I think sort of selling the smart contracts idea of it, if I remember correctly.
Interesting.
Anyway, I was one of the people at the bank invited into this meeting with him, and so some friends and I went out, and I literally posted on our Facebook group, which is where at the time we ran our investment club basically, and I said, hey, I met this guy today. It's this new coin. It could be a little bit like Bitcoin, but with these other utility aspects. And how about we buy $2,000 worth? And we got the full approval for it, which is just like enough thumbs up from at least half the group. It's pretty basic. And then it just, that memory, I went on to try and work out how to do it. It got too complex too fast, didn't buy it. And every year that thing pops up, it's like the approval of, and it gets reminded me from people in the group that how we missed out on the opportunity to buy.
So when did you or the group or anybody in the group eventually buy Ethereum?
So one of my good friends who's not in the group, but he did start mining Ethereum at that time. He found some way. He basically had more perseverance than I did. So he had there's this product called My Bitcoin Saver. I'm not sure if you remember that. It was a New Zealand business around the time, what year would it have been? I don't know, 2015, 2016 or something like that. And that's when I finally got into it, once it was easy enough and I could just dollar cost average into it. It wasn't a big bet. I think I started putting $10 or something into it, and do to this day actually. But now we have we decided at Sharesies once we started in 2017 was a bull run for crypto, and every second question on the platform was where's Bitcoin, and we didn't feel like we knew enough about it or felt confident in it, so we started a club then to try to learn about more and a bit more about it. And again, that club's still going.
Wow, that's cool. So yeah, that 2000 would have been like what, like 20 million?
What? Sorry, I haven't done the maths, and
Don't do the math. Don't do the math. It's going to depress you.
I said we would have sold by now. That's what I tell myself to make myself feel better. We wouldn't have been.
Yes.
So are you still investing into Bitcoin and Ethereum now, or are you kind of a bit more
I still
careful?
do that same amount, like a very small amount. I think I don't follow it overly closely or anything like that now. And to be honest, I say that I would sell it. I don't really sell anything, to be honest. Like I don't believe in my ability to do a good job of picking a good time to sell.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you went into KiwiBank, you spent a few years there, and then how did you think about kind of building your business? How did that come about? And how did you come up with the idea of Sharesies?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting maybe how I ended up at KiwiBank as a starting point, because I think it's a pretty cool thing that flows in nicely. But I was looking for a grad role. It's like sort of everyone's looking for a grad role. I'm sure I knew what a grad role was, but I knew that's what I should be looking for as a finance grad. And so
Sorry, what is a grad role?
it's like I still don't really know, but you go into a big firm or a bank or something like that, and you have like a nice 2 years where you get to experience different parts of the business, and it's sort of like considered sort of like the really, it's a hard job to get, like it's a bit of prestige in it, I suppose, and should serve you quite nicely, I think is the idea. But I was pretty unsuccessful actually. I did end up getting a grad role, but it was not in Wellington where I wanted to be. And I was all ready to go. My dad had driven and picked up furniture and everything, and we'd started to pack up. But one of the ladies at the band who was the band president, friend of mine, she was like, look, how do we get you to stay here? Because I was doing a bunch of the management for the band at the time. We'd really like you to. Is there anything we can do? I said, look, just find me a job in finance, and that would be how I do. And she said, look, I don't know if I can help with that, but my brother's involved in something with finance, so maybe you could chat with him. So she set me up with her brother. Trish was maybe 60 or 65 at the time. And her brother was, around the similar age, and I went to meet him. And at Pravda, actually, which is the cafe right beside where our office in Wellington is now. So it's pretty. I'm often reminded of this because I spend a lot of time in there. But we talked about what I wanted to do, just goals. And it turns out this guy Ian was the chairman of KiwiBank, among other roles. So he was a guy in finance, and as it turned out, quite a connected person in finance.
Wow.
And we had this awesome conversation. He sort of said, like, look, I can't really help you with a grad role or anything like that. But KiwiBank doesn't do grad roles, but they're really proactive in giving opportunity out of their call centers and operations teams and stuff. So, if you want, I can help get you a job in there, or at least a chance for an interview and stuff. So we went around in circles, and at the end of the meeting, once the time had got up, he sort of said, look, well, what are you going to do? Am I going to call Catherine, who was the general manager of HR at KiwiBank, or am I off to this job up north? What are you doing? I said, oh, look, I don't know still, so I'll have to let you know. And he said, well, how about this? He said, it seems to me that you're really on the fence. And like, I was starting the job on a Monday, right? I didn't have much time. And he just pulled a coin out of his pocket, and he goes to me, right, let's just decide on the flip of a coin. So heads, go up north and take this grad role, and tails, I make a phone call and we see if you can get a job in the call center at KiwiBank. Like, oh, I mean, it can't hurt. Let's see what it does. So he flipped the coin, and then he caught the coin, and he goes to me, which one do you want it to be? I said, well, I want to stay at Wellington. And he just put the coin in his pocket. He said, oh, well, I guess that's the answer. So, and I made the decision off that. I was like, that was a great sense of what I actually wanted to do and what I wanted to be. And it turned out that was a really great decision for me. Like, what he said was really true. Like, I spent 6 months in the call center, learning a huge amount about customers, a huge amount about banking at like the micro level, where the rubber hits the road. I think, it's like actually just matters what customers think, right? And then I was lucky enough to get some amazing opportunities out of there, in leadership and management and stuff as well.
So how did you climb up through the ranks?
Firstly, I was quite strategic about that. Like, I started by just wanting to be the highest performer in the call center. So like, it's really measurable, right? You've got these targets. You go in there, you arrive at 8:00, you leave at 5:00, and you do as many calls and stuff, and you hit these different things, which is all measurement systems are really great. And that really works for a brain like mine. Like, I can be motivated and I can work hard towards that. And I also I'd taken quite a big pay cut actually out of the army, which is not something you often hear out of army into the banks, but the way I'd gone about it. So I also took any overtime I could get. So I was working Saturdays, evenings, everything. Mostly that was not necessarily because I needed that money to live, but it was to keep my idea of being social and having fun and stuff like that. So the first opportunity came after about 5 or 6 months. I just stuck my head above my desk for a bit and said, hey, I'd like to look at some other opportunities here. And then I just started putting my hat in the ring and was given a couple of interview opportunities. I was quite deliberate also. I can't remember who coached me on this. Someone did. But in my first interview, I managed to find out what the manager of that team really liked about people, and it was for a business analyst job. And someone told all about he doesn't want answers, he wants questions. So all I did in the interview was focus on not giving him answers and just telling him what questions I'd be asking about. In my mind, I sort of went way too OTT on that, but it turns out it really worked. So, and then that was my first job out of the call center as a BA.
Wow.
And then just other opportunities opened up from that, quite quickly in hindsight.
That's impressive. Damn. So you started from like literally the lowest kind of position at the bank.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an entry level position. Like, I was telling someone the other day how terrifying it is to go. Some of the most nervous I've ever been is like in the bank. Within about 3 days, you're talking to the phone to customers who really give a shit about what you're doing, right? They don't really want you talking to an amateur because it's like their money.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, I am so unqualified for this right now.
Did you ever feel that before in any of the things you did before? Musicians or like amateur investing or
What was it? Sorry.
did you ever feel that like sort of imposter syndrome previously in your life, like before that moment?
I had moments of it in music, where particularly when I first joined army band. I don't think they did it. Some people would come out of university where you had quite a lot of performance coaching and stuff already as a musician. I came out of school and I came out of Hawera where I was sort of like the big dog, if you like. I could play and one of the stronger musicians in the band, into the band where everyone's like playing all day, every day, and felt very exposed there for a little bit when I first started. I don't think the onboarding process was great either for someone like that. But then I had a lesson with one of my friends actually, because I was he is my friend now. He wasn't at the time. He was a player in the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, like sort of next tier again of musicianship. And he stopped me playing. He's like, "You just look so nervous." And I'm like, and he sort of known me from the small town. He said, "I've never known you to be like that before." I was like, "I am so nervous. I don't know. I've got a problem with nerves all of a sudden." And he said, just try this, just try breathe. And he said, have you ever, you've been tipsy, you've enjoyed a few drinks and stuff? I'm like, yeah, I've done that. And he's like, he mentioned some other substances, and I was in the army. I was like, no, we don't do that stuff around here. I don't know what's going on. But he was like, well, he's like, regardless, these things like that, this feeling of tipsy is just energy and adrenaline going through your body. And like, it feels really good there. Why does it feel so terrible now? So just try reframe that. And then he just got me to breathe for a little bit and say, how good does this feel in my head? And it sounds ridiculous, but I never had a problem with performance nerves after that.
Wow.
I absolutely had it where I felt like I was going to lose control. And then I played in an All Blacks game on an Anzac Day doing a last post, and I started playing and I had this started feeling of nerves come over me again because it's this weird thing where you can't hear what you're playing, but you can hear it come over the speakers a couple of seconds later, and it completely played in my head. Terrifying. The TV camera right in front of you. And then I just went straight to that training in my head. I was just like, how good does this feel? And like, it was...
That's really good advice.
That's cool.
Anyway, so every time I sort of get like this imposter feeling or anything like that, I try to bring it something to like reframe it as a positive thing in my head.
I like that. I like that reframe. That's awesome.
Yeah, very good. So let's talk about Sharesies. So, you met your co-founder playing music, and then how did the idea come about?
Yeah, so there's lots of unique things about Sharesies, I think, but one of them is we had 6 co-founders. So it was sort of Brooke, Sonia, and I that we went full time originally, but we right from the start in our conversations and stuff, we had Richard, Martin, and Ben, who were our Richard and Martin technical co-founders, and Ben was our design co-founder. And Sonia had the initial idea of wanting to do something with $50, and she talks about being anti-marketed. She had like, I'll go try it, invest just small amounts because that's all she had, but there was no way that she could do that.
This was just like you guys were just like getting together as friends, and you're just like saying like, hey, we'd love to just like invest some money kind of thing.
Yeah. She was saying that to John, who now works at Sharesies and currently building our payments product. But he worked at KiwiBank at the time with us, and Sonia worked there, I worked there. Brooke and I were a couple. She was working at Xero at the time. Martin and I were playing in the band together. I'd met Richard once briefly. I didn't know Ben at all. Ben was Sonia's partner. And anyway, John said, you should chat to Leighton. He invests $50 a week. So there is a way to do it. And Sonia, her and I were working on a project at the bank, and she just brought that up, and then we started having coffees about it. And then it was so organic from there, except to say that there was a bunch of us. Brooke and I wanted to go and start a business. We just didn't know what that was, and we were actively looking for that opportunity. And there was this fintech accelerator that was coming up, and that seemed like something we could give a go. Sonia had seen the same thing, her and Ben. Richard and Martin had actually approached me about a job. They ran a consulting firm. They'd sort of inquired as to whether I'd be keen to come and sort of lead that from like a commercial perspective, because that wasn't their strength. Their strength is writing amazing code and products and services.
Uh-huh.
So it was just this real random collection and we got in a room, and I think we just got excited by this idea and the challenge around it. And you just could there was no one who we spoke to, I don't think, that didn't give us more encouragement that the customer problem is real.
Interesting. And I assume you knew about Robinhood and stuff, right?
No. Very soon after, but not at the time. I don't think any of us. Robinhood took quite a long time to come up. We heard of this other a product called Acorns, which we sort of came up with first. Already at that point, I think Robinhood had got a little bit of a reputation as a trading platform. Like the options stuff was dominating its brand awareness. So yeah, if I had heard about it, I didn't feel like that's what we were building, the New Zealand Robinhood or anything like that, which of course we later became. That's often how people talk about us.
And it's pretty uncommon to have 6 co-founders, right? Like, how did you guys I mean, it's cool that you have all, felt like you had conviction for the idea, but how did you manage the team? It's a big group. Like, I'm sure different people were different levels of conviction. How did that whole process? Usually it's like one person or two people, right? Because it's much easier to move two people than move six people along. How did you manage that whole group?
I mean, I guess it helped that Brooke, Sonia, and I couldn't write code. And we also believe in like beautiful product. And we're trying to build a financial services company. So I think we had no money, like, not enough to get started. We had 20 grand when we started Sharesies, as far as like an amount to get started with, which it seemed like enough at the time, but it's sort of comical now, right? For context, Sharesies capital requirements is tens of millions of dollars. So that's the money we have sitting in our bank just to operate, not to mention like the stuff on top of that. So,
Yeah.
I guess we went into the size thinking maybe Richard had captured the size of the complexity of being a financial services company a little bit more. But he was ready to come along this ride for us. I guess they're in their own work situation where they could do that. I think Martin's always up for a challenge and didn't think that he thinks most technical things that we throw at him on the face of it to him seem easy, which I think is and to be honest, sometimes he makes it look easy, but there's a huge amount of complexity that if you don't get started, you never find.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just like, I'm so hot. Like there's lots of startup rules. You guys will know it with like, how you approach. And I'm sure you've got your own things that you look at when you're looking at companies. For me, I care about three things with companies. And I thought about it then, and I still think it's true when I invest, which is, is there a market big enough for this problem to live in and to be solved in commercially? Is there a team that can deliver on it? And can they get enough funding to deliver on that? To me, I can't see that the team deliver on would have been there if there wasn't the six of us who just played completely separate roles in that journey.
That's cool. The team is stuck together.
Yeah, so Ben is no longer working at Sharesies. He's Sonia's partner still, but he is now looking after Meadow. I was about to say baby girl, but she's not. She was at our house the other day actually, and she threw something at me. She's not that much of a baby. So she's like, must be 2, coming up 3 now. But the other 5 of us are still here. Brooke and Sonia have had some time for babies. Apart from that, was charged on through. And even then, they were both on the board still, so it wasn't that much time.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive that you all stick together over such a long period of time. I think one of the most common reasons for kind of startup failure is that the founding team sort of breaks apart, right? Do you have any kind of secret on how you?
I think we right from the start, Brooke in particular was very deliberate about spending time on talking about what sort of company we wanted to be, what sort of company we wanted to work in. And like, we disagree on things all the time, sometimes very passionately. But we're also like, businesses are just one big trade-off, right? Like the classic mistake that almost everyone makes in their career at some point is to become a purist in some way, and you just cannot be in a business. And I think all of us were at the stage of our careers and lives where we knew that to be true. So we put measures in place that where disagreements were there, then someone would make a decision somewhere. And sometimes we test that just by saying, who cares most about this? Like that's normally a great way for us to, who's got the highest conviction, and then we'll get behind that. And it doesn't matter if it's not right. Like we all make mistakes all the time. But like, I think one thing that we've done very well, and we try to embed at Sharesies still, is like, big problems are just lots and lots of small problems. So we start by breaking down a big problem into small problems. And then all humans, the best thing that humans are good at is problem solving. Like you look at kids, how good they are at problem solving and how good they are at getting up again when something doesn't work. And for whatever reason, corporate careers and stuff can send you shy of that for a little bit. You start to feel like you have to present like, the answers and all those. So we were just hot on that not being a thing. So yeah, I think there's a bunch. I also believe luck is an absolutely not talked about enough, how gigantic luck plays with regards to whether your business is going to be successful or not.
Right. And wait, is Brooke your wife? So wait, were you guys together before you started?
Yes, we were. Yeah,
Wow.
That would have been big. That would have been pretty classic, wouldn't it? First office romance, can I? No, yeah, no. Brooke and I were a couple, and Ben and Sonia were a couple. And there's lots of people who didn't like that, by the way, either.
Wow. So wait, how many CEOs do you guys have?
It's the 3 of us co-CEO of the business.
Wow, I've never heard of that before. How does that work?
There are a few. There's a few New Zealand examples actually. Waitoa, for example, has 3 CEOs. Waitoa Workshop, and quite a few. Someone wrote a article on some point about companies, but yeah, around the world there's a few examples, but it's pretty rare. And like, I don't know, I don't think we'll be replaced when it comes our time to move off with 3 COs or anything like that. It's just how it works for us.
So how does that work? Like practically, right? Because it feels to me like if you have three people making executive decisions, that feels like a board, right? But if you split up roles and like you're specializing in this and they're specializing in something else, then it feels like you should have a more kind of defined, like why call everybody a CEO?
I think this question is sometimes best answered by the team than us, because it's just how we've always worked together. And sometimes it does come back on engagement surveys and stuff like that. That sometimes it's hard to make all three of us happy and all that sort of stuff. But I think the three of us, have a very good feel for when it's just a decision that needs to be made, or it's a decision we need to talk about. And the further we've gone, like when we were first started this business, we all wanted to be across everything. Like you couldn't sneeze at Sharesies without three. Well, there was only the three of us, to be fair. But we like every single thing we wanted to be like, we were that passionate about it. But now it's like, sometimes people still think it's a long time since the three of us considering it. Normally it's taking a long time because one of us is considering it very deeply, not because the three of us need to talk about it or anything. Like there's messages today where it's like, okay, I don't need to look at that again because that's just, I don't have or I know that someone else is over it or something. So yeah, it's organic in a way, but a lot of deliberateness as well through it. So because we don't look after specific sectors, all of us have a product background. And we all really wanted to make a place that was great to work. So I think that our product people and our people, like our HR peaks, like type teams, are probably the ones that have it the hardest, because it's more likely that the three of us will have a view.
Right. Interesting. Wow. How does that work in your family life then? If you guys are both CEOs of the company, then like when you come home, how do you is it just always about work, or how do you do you have like separation?
Sometimes it's about work when things are stressful, yeah. But we also sometimes I just don't want to talk about work anymore, and we'll say, okay, cool, we won't talk about work. Like now that we have kids, so Al was born, 9 months after we started Sharesies. We got married. We got married basically within our first week or two, which was already planned. Like we didn't know when we set the wedding date that we'd have quit our jobs by then. And then we we were lucky enough to have Al only a few months after that. That was like a wow. And so quickly, Izzy's didn't maybe, whilst it was obviously a big part of our lives and very dominant, I think kids are amazing perspective, right? They don't really give a shit what we do at work when you get home, and they take a lot of our attention. We do a lot of kid stuff now. It's an interesting balance, but I think in some ways it's easier with both of us doing what we do, because we can both understand. You've got a second conscience there if you need it on decisions that are hard. All the context of the stress that's going on, normally it's shared. And equally, I just don't think Brooke and I think it's true for Sonia too, probably, we're just not natural stressors, really. So
that's cool.
That helps.
And I'm just curious, did you get your kids like a Sharesies account for investing, or did you give them a Square? Because we're also invested in Square One. I'm curious if you got them a Square One card or.
Well, the kids are too young for that product, probably. Square One, I think it's more like a pocket money one, right? But Sharesies accounts they had since and I did that same math. So if we did $5 a week for Al, and it's about $7 or $6 or something like that for Louis, and he continues to do that, and she continues to do that through to being 60, then they'll never have to worry about retirement. And that's non-inflation adjusted. So you can just imagine what $5 will be in like 10 years time, right? Particularly the way we're going at the moment. It's
wow.
So yeah, it's time is the richest thing you can have, right? With money.
That's cool.
So maybe let's talk about the vision a little bit for Sharesies. So you got into this by making investment more accessible, I guess, and that's what you tried, what you achieved. So how do you think from here? Like, do you think the average sort of teenager is going to get into investing? Do you want to help them with that? Like, where do you think the company is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years?
The vision of the business was always, so the purpose of the business is to create financial empowerment for everyone. And our original vision, was that someone with $5 and $5 million could have the same money opportunities. And that served us really well for the first 7 years of the business. And then we started to outgrow that vision a little bit, because once people have access with $5, they then want all the other things. Like, the ambition is not that people will have $5, it's that they can get started with it. And we're sort of broken that now. Like, you ask me anything that we can invest in, strategically, that's not you still have to build some product, but if you wanted to invest in this podcast, I could sell it for less than $5 each, in a portion. We've got all those structures in place. And that vision was so good right through to even speaking with regulators and stuff as we've been licensed. Like no one was fractionalizing New Zealand, Australian stock exchanges, right? We're the only company still that does that. And you're talking about like how that doesn't work. Well, we're talking like, we set out front that what we're trying to do here is give 5 people $5 and people $5 million same opportunities. If we all still believe in that and buy into that, then we need to find a way to work. And to the point that sometimes when we're going through those licensing processes, the people we're working with will spit that back at us. It's like you don't even, it's almost like this really start solving the problems with you. It doesn't, and there's multiple times that happen in different sets. But then we have a few different arms to our business now. So the first pillar of our strategy is a wealth app that actually grows people's wealth. So that means we've got to get people, we want to create 1 million millionaires, right? That's what we're trying to create here. So, and that means you need a wider picture of wealth. So Sharesies is known for investing, but we now offer, we've got 70 or 80,000 people who have their savings on our platform. And then we have a whole bunch of people with their KiwiSaver or superannuation. I've got a bunch of people with their insurance, their car insurance. We're just going to keep broadening out these wealth app propositions, both here and in Australia. And then we've got this other pillar, which is connecting companies with their stakeholders. So we now have a huge amount of them shareholders who own businesses in New Zealand and Australia on our platform. And we want them to be engaged with, like, part of this democratization is that you get the same access to information that you would if you're running these big institutional funds or something like that. So now we're helping companies connect with them because we think it's really great business for them. So we run things like employee share schemes and we run a registry business, which has about 700 business customers. So
is that like a Carta?
Bit like that, that's right. And people don't really think about Sharesies that much as that being our business, but being a registry is actually a core part of our product. And then the third one is productizing our technology. It's in this one here, or at the second and the third pillar, they are the real global opportunities for Sharesies. And at the moment, like last year, we onboarded Fonterra farmers, for example. So Fonterra is a cooperative. That means it's owned by its members, which in Fonterra's case is the farmers and dairy farmers who supply milk to it, and they have to run a capital position based on a bunch of rules. And we now do that, so like all the farmers can manage it on their mobile in Sharesies and stuff. So it's like this other technology aspect to it. So the future of Sharesies is like using our software to be at the heart of people's wealth really across it. So you're really starting to integrate all of these places and getting that full picture of your wealth and ultimately helping you get ahead so that you can live the life you want. That's what we're aiming for.
Wow, that's cool.
There's there's lots of kind of, I guess, criticism on Robinhood, right, for like enabling gambling rather than investing, and enabling or like kind of getting people to invest in stuff that they don't understand in a way. How do you think about that? Like, do you do education around investing as well for young people?
We make a massive investment in education, and it's not to say that people don't make bad decisions on Sharesies, right? Because at the end of the day, we have 12,000 plus options, but we really believe in choice. Rewinding 8 years when we were sitting around our kitchen table talking about what Sharesies might be, one of the options was that we were like the first sustainable investing platform or ethics-based, or choose a term like that. And among the 6 of us, we couldn't agree on what that would look like. So you think, right, we've now got close to 800,000 users of our platform. Imagine trying to support 800,000 people with ethics-based decisions, or like everyone has different thoughts and views, and we think that choice is really important. So to your point, we front it with education, warnings if we think necessary. Like we have things like volatility warnings. We're trying to do much more in the portfolio space. We'll definitely move into advice for the first time with the AI tools and LLMs. You can see scalable advice that is actually good. So we're really heavily investing in this space still. We're taking the point on Robinhood. Like there are actually a lot of similarities between our business, there's no doubt. And actually, I think Robinhood are trying to, or they have tried to democratize this world. What a lot of people don't appreciate is that their options trading business probably funds a huge amount of the development for lots of other things. So, and maybe they haven't got that balance quite right a few times. I don't really know. And I don't spend a huge amount of time looking at that, but I do know that Sharesies has a profile of customer that means for a huge number of people who sign up and use the platform every day, we lose money on. And there'll be a point where they go through that curve, right? And that's at a point of wealth, because ultimately there's a fixed cost for everything we do. It costs $7 or $8 just to get someone onto the platform through AML and all that sort of thing. You think about what it costs if you end up speaking to a human. Most of that's not, I mean, this is the things we have to comms with our own team even, but ultimately the purpose of the business is really strong on what we're trying to do. So we won't jeopardize that. And that's why we're not in things like options and stuff right now.
Yeah. And this idea of democratizing access to other investment opportunities, the millionaires have access as wholesalers to some stuff that the normal retail investor doesn't. I mean, there's like two sides to it, right? Like on the one hand, yes, like everybody should have access to like these growth opportunities because that's how you become wealthy. But on the other hand, if you're not as sophisticated as an investor, maybe you shouldn't have access because you don't have all the information that's needed. How do you think about that?
I've got a way more bullish approach on that. Like, I think people almost always make good decisions, and people make bad decisions would probably make bad decisions where they had access to it on our platform or somewhere else, right? And I talked about me in this as well. Like I say, I like risk, and I've made some very bad decisions, but I think I've made some good learnings. And ultimately, I think I think you do make your money with risk, and you keep it with diversification. So once people understand what that means for them, the key thing for me is that people understand what that risk is, and so it's not the decision made, it's that when you went in, you knew what the factors were that supported you in that decision, which is why I really dislike the whole things like, the hey, earn guaranteed 10% on this housing development or something like that, right? Because you are not presenting the facts to people, which is that, hey, you probably should be priced at a 30% risk here or something. So like, it's just really, as long as the information is there, they can see volatility, they've got the information, and they can do with it a small enough amount, then I think people should have the opportunity to go for it. And yeah, I also think that almost everyone I've come across has the capacity to make a good decision as an investor for them based on what they know, if they're given the right inputs.
If we just roll back a little bit to the very, very beginning. So the initial idea was, how do you allow anyone to just invest with a small amount of money? And were you thinking about investing into New Zealand stock and public companies, or to global public companies? How are you thinking about that initial kind of idea of what Sharesies was supposed to be?
I mean, the US markets have always been interesting. It's the biggest capital market in the world, right? Sort of, it'll be interesting. I think it's going through some interesting times at the moment, if I'm honest. But the institution of America, I'm sort of still optimistic for that, even though I'm not particularly enjoying the state of it at the moment, I suppose. And I think investing in those markets is probably still a good idea into the future. And certainly when we started, it felt like it was. And New Zealand, we're passionate about homegrown capital, and we think more capital in New Zealand would be a great thing. And we love to encourage that. And then other markets are all on our radar, and we do want to continue doing that. It's just a capacity thing. The US market, for example, is well and truly democratized. We didn't have to fractionalize that ourselves, already done. You mentioned Robinhood. There's a bunch of other players. We integrate with DriveOff over there. It's an amazing API suite. And when we build to the New Zealand exchange or the Australian exchange, like, it's sort of setting back 30 years sometimes with like the amount that you just don't have those integrations available to you. And we'd like to make that available more broadly, like more people investing into the New Zealand market in particular. It's going to be fine, and it has a massive natural benefit.
What is it? Is it the US, China, Europe, and Australia?
I think that's the order, yeah. So, and that's like obviously compared to population, gigantic, right? Yeah. So we're just going to keep going with adding more investment options and also more wealth options across the platform. And it's like, we don't feel like we need to build everything ourselves. We're really keen to partner, and we really like the idea of other people using our software to make these things available, like both commercially and for the purpose of Sharesies. It makes sense that that's the way it would play out.
So Sharesies right now is only Australia and New Zealand public companies?
Yeah. And I think most likely B2C, that's how it will remain. Like, never say never, but it's very expensive to build B2C brands. I'm not saying it's not expensive to build B2B, but our experience is you can get there's just far more rational decision making in businesses, right? Because it's their job to make rational decisions. Whereas with our own lives and where we are, like, it's way more of a convenience thing normally. And the apathy element's been so strong. So we found Australia, even as close as it is to New Zealand, quite different. So how we need to market that and how we need to build that brand.
What are some of those differences?
Just this, it tends to be in the detail, like how you speak to people, like how in the competitor scene, definitely, just like the fact that it is a lot more competitive. And when you're competing on a retail brand in Australia, you're not just competing with other financial services, you're competing with people's attention broadly.
Yeah.
it's a bit more dog eat dog over there. Like, so there's just quite a few, and probably every day we just realize it's so important to have people on the ground there, basically.
And
It's very
so,
hard.
and the unique sort of innovation, I guess the thing that you guys did that no one else did was fractionalizing shares, right? Was that sort of the first thing?
No, I think what we did is we made people feel like an investor. And that was probably the first thing we did. Because again, when we first started, all our surveys were like no one ticked that they were an investor, even though they had KiwiSaver or superannuation somewhere. Often that was the biggest part of their wealth, but it didn't make them an investor. But if people have a Sharesies account, they always tick yes, I'm an investor.
And is the idea that you sort of direct them to invest into index funds or specific shares, stock? Kind of how you think about that?
Yeah, we do have like some packs available for people, like index investing, global index investing, and then like we have like sustainability managed funds and like kids accounts, which is more about tax optimization. And then after that, it's up to people to choose. But the S&P 500 dominates the investment that goes through Sharesies. So coming back to that point of you can make everything available, but by and large, people will do their research and make good decisions.
Oh, okay. So they're investing in the US S&P 500.
Yes.
Okay, so you have access to that. You don't have individual American companies, but you have the S&P.
No, we have about 12,000, I think, US options on the platform.
Right. Okay. So they can buy like Apple, Tesla, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right. That's cool. And were you like the first ones to offer that to Kiwi and Aussie?
You could, in a digital way, but you could access it. It was just like, maybe on the phone to your broker or something.
Yeah.
In Australia, there was another company that was there first, I think, with US. But yeah, so we did have first mover advantage in New Zealand. We didn't in Australia. But we're still playing in a different space to others. Like the Australian markets, while still tiny on a global scale, which is what you realize when you spend time with Australian entrepreneurs. They spend their whole time telling you how small Australia is, and you're like, man, come to Wellington.
Come to Hawera, right?
Come to Hawera, that's right. But that's good for ambition and thinking. Like I love spending time in that and that ability to keep broadening the scope of what you could do. And it's the beauty of technology, right? The tale of financial services and true democratization and an advancement of technology and platform. It's going to be so long. Like we're not even scratching the surface globally on this. There's some big brands that you can name, and most people can name. As a consumer level, some of these brands are big, but with regards to where assets are sitting and where all the money in the world is sitting, like it's going to be a very, very long tail, and it'll look so around 50 years.
Well, that's actually what people like the crypto people say, right? Like they say it's what is it? How big is crypto right now? Like a couple of trillion or something?
Yeah, two trillion.
Yeah,
and they say it's like like you can have like a medium-sized hedge fund that has that size, right? So like it's all still the very beginning. I mean, how do you think about these alternative? I mean, a lot of people now are getting into gold, crypto. During the kind of like the 2021, 2022 bull market, a lot of people were getting into like NFTs, but also like fractionalized art, like all kinds of different assets, collectibles. How do you think about that whole space? Like, do you think that's all just like gambling and a function of just like the bull market, or is there actually some value in some of these products?
I think there's better ledgers than blockchain, firstly. So that's one view. But sometimes that doesn't matter. What matters is where there's people and where there's money. So maybe that will play out. I think on the NFT space definitely had its boom, right? But I think that as technology is going to be here into the future, and like there's some merit to that, and certainly in the like I do believe art will live into the future, and it seems far less likely it's going to be funded how it was historically. So if you believe both those two things to be true, then something's missing. It's like, as Richard always asks us, what's the third one? So we've got to think about what that was, so I think there's lots of change and stuff to come there. Things like gold, like it's been around forever, right? It's not been a particularly great asset as far as return goes if you look far enough over time, but it has stood the test of time with regards to being there and holding its ground during disruptive periods. And we've got a reasonable amount of people investing in gold on our platform. Same with Bitcoin through the ETFs. And but it's just yet to be seen to me exactly how that plays out. Except to say, to your point, they're big enough now that it seems sensible to have some portion of wealth.
Interesting.
Like I think there's still going to be a lot of people trying to get rich. By and large, the people we see on Sharesies tend to have the bulk of their portfolio in what most advisors would recommend, and then play around on the sides.
So if you were starting off today, you come from Taranaki, have the $50 a week you can invest. What would you invest into? Yeah, Sharesies. What would your portfolio look like?
I do have that portfolio, and I do dollar cost average. And so, firstly, I would dollar cost average. I really believe that as a strategy. And now that its ability, like I think almost everyone overestimates their ability to pick timing. Like unless it takes a lot more energy and you've got a lot more information. And Buffett says if you're not going to do any work for it, then why do you think you should get any? What are you bringing to the table that means you should get any more than what the market's delivering? So, yeah. I'll do exactly what I'm doing now. Probably I think what I would have done is I probably would have tried to pick and choose quite a lot when I first started, but I think that would have encouraged me to put more in. And interestingly, that might have meant that I was better off because of that. Like ultimately what you put in at the start really matters as well. And I think I'd be pretty diversified. But if I was going to say, hey, Leighton, do this really, really rationally, then I'd say two things. I'd say, firstly, just back those big indices and in time and put most of your money into that. And then secondly, keep a close eye on pieces of technology in particular that you are using that you think everybody else should be and you can't understand why they're not. And then I'd say have a crack at those, because that's proven to be quite a successful strategy for me. Like I had some quite nice, where I've had above average returns in some companies. It's where companies that Slack is a great example. Like when we first started using Slack, I was like, why on earth is every single person in the company not using this? Yeah. And of course, now we have lots of different versions of it, but it became a very big company very quickly. What's another one? Snowflake, I was a data analyst, and once I first experienced Snowflake, I had that same feeling, so I went straight away and invested. It hasn't worked in all of them. DocuSign, I had the same feeling for. Unfortunately, I caught the top of that. So it doesn't always work out, but it keeps me interested.
That's cool. Interesting. What are some trends? What are some tech trends? I mean, obviously there's AI now, but what do you think those tech trends are? Like, if you were like, you're talking to some, we hope this podcast inspires future Leightons to create future companies and future investors in the region here. What do you think those trends are? Like, if you like, obviously you see quite a broad perspective, right? Given where you are, what are you kind of most excited about right now?
I mean, the simplifying of people's lives and optimizing of people's lives and things we don't want to do. AI is like, I don't like we've never really been involved in buzzwords, but you can't not talk about it at the moment. It's fundamentally changing our business already, and it's very hard to see it not materially changing everything in the next 2 or 3 years to quite so what I would encourage people to think for is still just to not worry too much about the technology, but try keep up with it, like know what's happening and just find a really good customer problem. Because ultimately is soon even with the AI companies out now, anyone who starts with AI as their solution is a bit of a red flag for me, right? Because you've got the solution before I understand the problem. And the other things are in that stuff, it's going to change so much. So having a problem that is valuable to customers to solve is still the core way to a business. I'm sure there's examples of businesses that have, although I can't really think of any to be honest, but that have started from a technology point. I think looking for that customer problem and learning to identify.
Crypto's one, right? Crypto's maybe one.
Yeah. Although the truth is, crypto found a use case, right? A value case,
which was
anonymous transactions. It meant that larger amounts went in early, and since then it's flowed on. And that's not what the initial use case was meant to be. Like, there's heaps of examples. Like I can think of heaps of companies where that's true. Like where, hey, I started with a problem and then solved another one. Like that's cool. Like that's just staying. That's
pivoting, right?
Yeah, that's pivoting. And now people will tell you all sorts of reasons for why they hold crypto, right? Some people still genuinely believe it's going to be a payments thing, which for Bitcoin in particular seems impossible, basically. But as a store of wealth, that seems like there's potential, and I can see why if you're an economy that you don't trust the fiat currency and stuff like that, why you would want to trust something else. You can start to see these other use cases for things. The trends that I see happening are still probably the same as they've ever been, in that customers are looking for their problems to be solved in ways of value, and maybe more importantly, in places they can trust. So prioritizing those two pieces, I think, is still critical.
Makes sense. Yeah. And looking at the next 3-5 years, I mean, it feels like we're at a very unprecedented time in human history with AI and what's possible, right? Things are just getting faster and faster. And it feels like we're just a little bit off from AI becoming embodied and robots kind of doing stuff for you. And we've talked to, some robotics folks on the podcast, and they're kind of seeing stuff speed up, right? Even though the LLMs aren't helping, the fact that you have LLMs and you can write code faster, all these things help you just develop physical stuff faster as well. I'm curious how you think about that, and how you think about that, like for yourself personally, but also just for your business. And yeah, like do you think about like, hey, like everything that we're doing at the company, like maybe can be fully automated, right? Eventually maybe we don't need employees. And what does that kind of mean for people?
Yeah, so I do think that most of what we do now will be able to be fully automated as it exists right now, with regards to like the doing of stuff. With regards to the thinking and businesses not needing humans, I can't see that. A few reasons for that, like I think that completely underestimates how important relationships are to commercials and how unimportant technology is to commercials.
Mm.
Sadly, I would say sometimes, like the best product seldom wins. The strongest relationship almost always does, and relationship can be made up of lots of. There's lots of things that can make that. Like I'm not just saying two people who are friends. I'm saying like the relationship you have with the community as a business, as a brand, and the trust that has, quite broad in that sense, I suppose. So what I hope for me is that AI is going to mean that I can do less of the things that I don't want to do and more of the things that I do want to do. Like I think I still have a healthy fear around some of the AI things and where it's going. Like I am often mind blown at both how smart and how stupid it can be. And we do spend a lot of time with these models, and like I say, we're using them a lot already. In fact, we're now over 85% of our customer responses, through AI tools, LLMs. If you rewind a year, we're just beta trialing this with a couple of thousand people. So the speed of that transition has been immense, and what that's meant for that team is interesting, and that team have gone from one of the most unsatisfied teams at Sharesies to one of the most satisfied, because they're now working on complex human problems and thinking about that, and they're training LLMs, and their whole job has changed, right? They still have a job, but it's changed so much. So yeah, I agree, it's unprecedented. I certainly haven't experienced anything like it. It's very, very exciting, not without a little dose of fear as well.
Are you, because then there's some people very close in our circles who actually have real, they think there's a real like 5, 10, 15% chance probability that there's a world where AI sort of just takes over and kills everybody. Is that the kind of fear you have, or you're less of that?
It's not that level of fear, but I do think there's a pretty high chance that something really happens, quite bad happens before we capture it, and it has a larger than it should impact on people before it stopped, which I think we will be able to do most likely from what. But yeah, I'm starting to speak so far out of my depth. Like I say, I'm doing a lot of reading on this, but still feel like I'm just scratching like the. And people writing these algorithms don't necessarily know how they work, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
But yeah, we're keeping a close eye.
Cool. Well, enough with the AI doomerism. I really want to know about the pub that you co-founded.
Oh yeah, so Waitoa Beer. It'll be interesting to see how AI can help us like brew beer, right? That would be good. Because that's pretty backbreaking stuff, and I think about AI lifting kegs and all that sort of stuff. Like robots can, but yeah, we actually started Waitoa, which is our beer brand, just before Sharesies. So it's been a fun journey. It's like sort of become an accidentally big business in some ways. Like it's not tiny now. It's in a lot of supermarkets. It's been widely distributed in Australia and New Zealand. And we've had some great success with awards and stuff, which sort of fed that growth actually. And the only reason we got into wholesaling and trying to get into supermarkets is because of COVID, which was like we can't run bars anymore, right? Window, can't sell kegs, so we got to start selling cans. So next thing you know, we did that. And yeah, I'm still pretty actively involved. I do something for that business every day, but meet with the team every Monday. And we have a really fun team to work on, and it's just something. It's so different. I've made lots of mistakes on where I thought there were similarities between that business, and there's some crossover in running it, but maybe the best thing you can know through running a business is that every business is different.
Yeah.
And that quite deeply.
Leighton, do you guys use Upstock for it?
Yeah, we do.
They're a company, yeah, they're a portfolio company. Right?
And do you know how to brew beer?
Yeah, we've actually I think Upstock's still being used by the move to a different distributor, but we were one of the quite passionate users. Yeah,
That's cool. I think Philip introduced this. Or is it Philip introduced it?
yeah, that's right. So Phil's also been quite an early shareholder in Sharesies, so we've known him and Duncan actually. So
That's cool.
they're great guys.
That's awesome.
I didn't realize you guys were obviously that. That's cool. Who else is in your
Say it again?
What are the other who else have you got in your portfolio? Any new and exciting ones coming up at the moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're in Besev. Yeah, we've got a bunch of the folks. I mean, most of the people on our podcast initially were portfolio companies.
Right.
So Besev, Parrot, Analytics.
Yeah, I mean, we've got like 55 portfolio companies now across Fund 1 and Fund 2. So it's quite a broad portfolio. Anything from crypto marketplaces, B2B SaaS, back in the day. Yeah, it's quite a big one. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Leighton. This was really fascinating.
I wanted to ask one more question.
Sure, go for it.
A few minutes. I'm very curious about, I mean, all the stuff you're seeing now with just the U.S. kind of going through some convulsions. How do you think about that more globally, just from a more macro perspective? I mean, we personally think that New Zealand and Australia are very kind of neutral. Like they can allied with the U.S., do trade with China, maybe do like from our aerospace companies, for example, we see that it's actually super beneficial to be New Zealand domiciled because they don't have the the laws, the U.S. laws that prohibit you from selling and working with other countries. So you can sort of play both sides of the field. I'm just curious kind of how you think about that geopolitical piece, because I think that plays really big into financial markets, right?
Yeah, it does. I'll start by saying I'm an optimist in humans and an optimist in democracy as well, and believer of that. So, like, I think I cannot understand some of the things that are happening in the United States, and I wonder if that I will be able to read back on a blog, some deep research that someone has done at some point in the future and understand it better. And ultimately, I think how this plays out is going to be fine. And a few people that maybe shouldn't look like geniuses will for some way or another, because I'm such an optimist on humans generally. And I have so many American friends and some of them who voted for this sort of, knowing that some of this would come about, but still did that anyway, who I really trust that ultimately America will make a stand for something. I just don't know where that line is. That's what's really confusing me, because I think the institution of America, and maybe there's a big adjustment that needs to be changed. I think maybe my overarching feel is to change something, you can't just like be average the whole time, right? Like if you want to move in any direction, you have to over index. Always. A great example is if you're trying to get more women on boards or something like that. This was taught to me by Brooke probably a few years ago, but it's like you can't just start by having the average number of women and men on boards. Like you have to get that skill set up and everything. You actually have to go the other way before it comes back to being that's how it works. Like that's how averages work. And I think about that with what's happening in the world right now, and I think this imbalance and this dream that everyone's being sold has not played out, or is now everyone is not in the position they feel like they should be, and democracy and all these things that the institutions are not delivering for them. So we're just over indexing again. And I just think that I'm still very hopeful that'll be point in time. So I follow it quite closely. I'm grateful for short cycles of power in our world, and I think where I'd get really terrified would be if that changed.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good perspective. I think I generally take your view as well that things will probably be okay long term. A lot of my friends, especially in California, they're just like going crazy about what's happening. And there are some like kind of dangerous things, right? So there is like sort of a line beyond which like you've crossed some like chasm and then you can't really go back and everything's broken. And you've seen that like in the 20th century. So I think people are scared that's going to happen. But as long as that doesn't happen, I think it'll probably be okay. And,
yeah.
I like your point about over indexing to kind of get it straight. Yeah, that's.
And I just don't know what. I'm not sure about you guys, but I struggle to trust much of what if I was almost just want to go over there and talk with people and I think I'd get a far better sense. And sometimes that's unfair because like white males from New Zealand tend to do pretty well most places in the world, so it's like you want to do that with a different, with a more diverse group of people and get a bit of a wider sense. But I don't really trust. I've got now a healthy distrust, I think, just the content that I'm getting. So I always try to go places that are not my natural home to read news. And sometimes I get there, I'm like, why am I here? But it's like I make myself read it.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I agree. I think going to a place, I mean, yeah, you definitely kind of see that most places are fine, right? Most places, I mean, yeah, the stories you hear are more like clickbait, overblown kind of things to get your attention rather than like the average. Yeah. And I really loved what you said about, yeah, humans are not very good at statistics.
Yeah.
Because yeah, we're not like wired naturally to think about aggregate things. It's just like, yeah, just don't die, just avoid this thing always, right? So I think that's really, I think that plays very well into this, because if you see a story, you kind of extrapolate and think this is like true for everywhere, whereas maybe it's just an anomaly, an exception.
Yeah, there's a great like I do, which is a classic like 37-year-old thing to say as I'm now hitting midlife, but then, like, which I just don't identify as in my head. I'm still like 29
Yeah.
or something. Like I do now with kids as well. I think a lot about technology, and I'm like, man, I actually am genuinely grateful that I just missed like the social cycle and stuff as a teenager. Like I think just hitting that, I don't even like thinking about what 17-year-old Leighton, how he would have like, interacted with this stuff.
Yeah.
It's quite different to just putting up with 800 people at Harvard High School, this whole world pile on that can happen, or fear.
How do you deal with kids and technology? Do you prevent your kids from using phones, iPads, or do you?
I mean, they educational stuff. They're probably too young to. So my little boy is really not that interested at the moment, which is quite good. And then my daughter she would absolutely. She loves it. She's a little bit older than him as well, so they can watch things. But we are very careful about that. Like I don't even really trust YouTube Kids or anything like that. I've heard too many stories and the things that can pop up. So the brains, you just see they're so they can capture so much information and learning so quickly at that age, and yeah, it's dangerous for that content. So I'm actually really nervous about having teenagers in that, to be honest. Like I think I'll face into it as it comes, but at some point they're going to have their own phone and tackle the world by themselves, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think like they don't have to have a phone that's a smartphone, right? Like, and I think there's ways you can kind of control those things. I think there's things that are genuinely bad. Like social media probably on net is probably not that good. So you can actually just, when you're a parent, right? It's like you can just say no, right?
be shy of being the boss, that's
Yeah.
for sure. I already get the "you don't own me" every now and again, which I remember saying that to my parents. I was like, well, actually, you sort of do.
Yeah, well, but I think it's interesting because you grew up with, like what you said, a bunch of siblings, right? 5 siblings.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I think that's an environment where like, yeah, you're just like scrambling, like get some food, get something for Christmas, right? Everyone's competing for stuff.
That's right.
So yeah, I think, but I also think New Zealand's a good place to has less of that than places like the U.S. and probably Australia has less of that. I think social media pressure and like I don't know, it feels like that.
Yeah.
Australia
think
banned
so.
social media for 16-year-olds, under 16-year-olds. So
Yeah,
I think they also take a different direction.
But yeah, I think, on the other side of that, right, we're maybe one of the earlier generations of parents that are pretty native to this stuff. So, I mean, kids can almost always pull wool over their parents' eyes, right? That's happened for generations. I don't think that'll stop now. I think maybe some of those bigger gaping holes and stuff in the process we'll be able to get ahead of.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Hopefully it's interesting for you guys to chat, but I enjoyed chatting with you guys as well. We should catch up at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. Sounds great. Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for tuning in to TechMates. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with friends. We'll be back soon with more stories of Kiwi and Aussie founders reshaping the future and disrupting down under. Until next time, keep dreaming big and daring to disrupt.